In this tutorial I'd like to demonstrate how we can use the orb to control the XS, and when doing so we can actually assign different glide times to each oscillator. It's pretty unique, and we'll show you the ways that the orb handles glides different than the XS. So you get different results depending on whether we're controlling the XS via MIDI or via the CV gate controls. So to set this up, we've got oscillator A set to the 0 octave, oscillator B set to the 0 octave. In the CV track control, this is where it's important to determine which oscillator is going to be controlled via MIDI or the CV input. Whenever you see the letters A and B, that represents oscillator A and oscillator B. Whenever you see an X next to the letter, like this one says A-BX, that means A is going to be getting MIDI over, or getting control over MIDI. B is going to be getting it from the external CV. If we go AX-B, that means A is going to be getting its control from the external CV. B will be getting it from MIDI. And our final selection is ABX, which means both of the oscillators will then be getting their control via the external CV input. So for this demonstration, we're going to set up to use the A-BX. So A will be getting control from MIDI, B will be getting control from the CV input. On the orb, we are going to create a new pattern, so let's go ahead and go back into pattern select mode, hold down that pattern and press the clear key, go back into pattern edit mode, and now you can see we've got a blank pattern here. So for this simple demonstration, we're going to create two half notes. So we're going to press down the note we want it to start on, press the note where we want it to end, and let's go ahead and do that for step 9 as well. Okay, so let's select the step where these notes start. We can see we've got a glide and the pitch of C1 for this half note. Here we've got a glide and a pitch of C6 for that half note. Let's go ahead and turn the glide off for this one. So what's going to happen is this is going to play, and when it gets to this step, it's going to glide from the pitch of C1 to C6. And the difference you'll see is that when the XS interprets MIDI and we adjust its glide time, when this note reaches this point, the XS over MIDI will glide and continue to glide that C1 pitch all the way up to C6 throughout this range. Where the orb, we've got this glide time here to control the pitch being controlled by this external CV input. As we increase this, you'll notice that the glide will only glide its time on this step here. So you hear a woo, and it'll kind of glitch on you, and we're going to show you a way that you can imitate what the XS does with the orb and vice versa. So let's go ahead and start this. And right now let's turn up oscillator A. Let's turn on our glide times first. So there we hear C1 and C6. Now we should be gliding from C1 to C6 when we get to this point, so let's increase the glide time. Now let's set a nice long glide time. And we can hear it gliding up to C6 all throughout this range. Now let's go ahead and turn that down and listen to oscillator B. Now let's turn up the orb's glide time. And you hear that? It's only trying to glide for the duration of this note here. So one thing we can do to resolve this and make it behave just like the XS is, since this note is C6, we could tell that note to glide to this note and set that note to glide and have it be the same pitch. So we've already set up these pitches on these steps to be C6. Now since this note was originally sustaining all the way down to here but was not set to glide, we're going to select this last step and make sure that its glide is turned off, as indicated by that LED. So now let's go ahead and start the orb again, and we're listening to oscillator B. And now we have the same effect as if we listen to oscillator A. Just different glide times there. Now let's listen to both of them. Now we can adjust the glide times independently. Let's say now you're hearing oscillator A. Let's do a little glide time on there. Fast glide time. Now let's introduce B with a slower glide time. Now where that might come in useful is just for kind of fattening effects when you're gliding notes and using both oscillators at the same time. Other interesting results might be, let's turn down the glide of, let's say, the Orb, which is oscillator B, and turn up the glide of oscillator A. And now let's just listen to the ring modulator, because it's ring modulating these two oscillators. Now let's clear out our glide times so they're both the same. Now you're hearing the ring modulator just about canceling out because the frequencies are so similar, but let's detune those a little bit. And now let's adjust the glide time. So that's a neat way that you can change the way the ring modulator is working between the two oscillators, and for certain notes have them being in phase and other notes kind of be gliding out of phase. Another thing you could do is we could have a MIDI controller keyboard here. We could route the MIDI output of that keyboard into the MIDI in of the Orb. We could go into the song mode of the Orb, select MIDI, and go ahead and hit this button until it says external. Go ahead and hit the MIDI key until this LED goes off. Hit the song key to get out of there. Now we've set up the Orb to respond to external MIDI coming in. So it'll translate the notes we play on that MIDI controller keyboard and spit out the translated control voltage and gate signals to the XS. At the same time, we could take the MIDI through of the Orb, route it to the MIDI in, so the XS is also getting MIDI coming from the keyboard as well. And again, we could set our CV track control, so one oscillator is controlled by MIDI, the other one's controlled by CV, and then as we play notes we could get gliding various times between the different oscillators. Now one thing I'll point out, as long as we're talking about MIDI on the Orb, if you ever press the play key on the Orb and see that it just lights up and it's not blinking, that's an indication that the Orb is now waiting for an external MIDI clock to sync its playback to. The difference between the Orb syncing to an external clock to play back its internal sequences and it translating incoming MIDI notes to convert to the CV gate output messages is just the indication of this LED. So when it's off, we're just going to be interpreting MIDI notes coming in and spitting out the CV and gate information of the notes we're playing on that MIDI controller keyboard. When it's on, we're queued up and we're waiting for an external clock, and at that point we will then play our internal sequences in time with whatever external MIDI gear we've got. So play with that and have fun, and lots of cool things you can do with detuning the oscillators in that way, having them set different glide times, and so just play with it. Now I'd like to show you what happens when we remix portions of these notes. Since we've got two notes here, and this is a sustaining note for a half note, and this is another half note that's sustaining. Let's go ahead and turn this on, and again we can hear these C1 and C2 notes playing. But let's go ahead and activate the remix. Now the sequencer's jumping around and trying to play sustained portions of these notes, and it's not actually going to play anything because nothing exists there. You know, all the information is right here where that note started, telling it needed to sustain. Now what we can do is, if we write these sustained portions of the notes now with glides, let's go ahead and go back here, and we gotta set a glide there. So again, this pattern gives us the exact same results as if we write this pattern without a glide there, without remixing it. But now let's say we write those same notes and we glide to here. Now we can remix it and we get a different result. In the same way, now you notice when these notes are selecting, we're not getting any information. So let's go ahead and select those, and these are written with C1, but they're also written to glide. So if we go out of remix, we still get that original C1 to C6 glide, but when we go to remix, we get totally different results. So this is a way that you can write different patterns and get different results within the remix control, which is important to know. Now let's go ahead and we can leave our pattern set up here. We're going to take the remix off. Let's go back here and turn up our volume. Now let's say that's cool, but let's say we wanted a gated type effect on the envelope and the amplifier section. Let's plug in the LFO output and select our square wave. Notice we've also got sync turned on in the LFO section. What that's going to do is MIDI clock coming in here is going to sync this frequency of this LFO to the MIDI clock, and the rate control is going to select our divisions. Now I've already set this up so we're at the 16th note clock duration, and every time we send a MIDI start message with that clock, it'll resync the phase of this waveform. So let's plug in the LFO out into the gate input and go ahead and start our sequencer. Now let's go ahead and turn up our glide. And now you can tell that we're still getting that glide every time the gate is re-triggered. Let's go ahead and adjust our filter cutoff here and our envelope times. And again, we could select the remix. In addition, we can change the rate of the LFO. Or we can slow it down. Now one thing you'll notice is as we make adjustments to this rate control while it's syncing, you have the ability to throw the LFO waveform out of phase with where it currently is and where it normally would be when the LFO resyncs when sending a new MIDI start message. So in some cases that can be useful. Let's say you're using like the sawtooth or the triangle wave, and you don't want that waveform to always be perfectly in sync the way it starts when we start our MIDI clock. So you could throw it out of phase by selecting a different rate and then go back to where you just were, and that'll lock in the rate to the correct rate, but now you've changed the phase. Let's go ahead and restart this and turn up our volume. Now you'll notice we also can use this LFO output as we are for our gate input. We can also use that to go to other synthesizers or arpeggiators and clock them over the MIDI clock using a logic clock. And then we can use our rate control to set up divisions very long, up to like 30-second notes. I forget all the different divisions, and there's some irregular time signatures in there as well. The thing to know about is the LFO output. Its range goes from -5 volts up to +5 volts. 5 volts will generally trigger most logic circuits like an envelope or anything else in your Eurorack or large format modular system. And the negative voltages you generally don't have to worry about because most logic inputs, they've got some sort of protection in there, but always do refer to the owner's manual of the device you're controlling and just make sure that negative voltages aren't going to hurt it. With the XS, you really don't have to worry about it. We've got all that protection built in. So, while we're on the subject of using the LFO to trigger our envelopes using the gate input on the XS, let's go ahead and plug the LFO out to the gate input. And now you'll just hear basically a repeat feature of the envelopes. We can adjust the LFO time here to adjust the repeat. And also, in my setup, I've switched things around. I've got a MIDI keyboard now hooked up to the MIDI in of the XS. And what I'm going to show you is that I can play notes on the keyboard while it's using the LFO to gate those notes, and we get a simple type of sequencer here. So let's turn this up. Now I'll play different notes on the keyboard. And notice I'm just playing one note at a time. If I alternate my playing style and play two notes at a time, I can turn up the glide time here and make certain notes glide. Let's go ahead and try some of that. So that's a simple way you can kind of create your own little sequencer just using the LFO and a MIDI keyboard to do some simple stuff. The only thing you have to keep in mind is when you play your notes, you want to play them in sync with when the new notes are being played by the LFO, when it starts its new waveform phase. Another neat little trick we can do is, even though we've got the LFO connected to the gate input, the gate out of the XS is still being generated by the MIDI keyboard. So let's say we connect the gate output to the velocity input. We then can use velocity, or when notes are played or held on the keyboard, and adjust our velocity setting in the amplifier, for instance. And so when I hold down this note, oops, let's turn the volume up. So right now I'm not playing any notes on the keyboard. As soon as I press a note on the keyboard, this happens. You'll notice that right now the level got louder, and when I let go of the key, it got quieter. As I increase this velocity value, currently I'm not holding a note. This envelope is repeating due to the LFO. Now when I press a note on the keyboard and let go, it goes away. So now I've got a gated, clocked envelope here. Let's increase our LFO speed here. So that way I can make rhythm patterns by holding notes on when I want that to happen and letting go when I don't want it to happen. Now again, I can create two different levels here, and you'll notice that when I played a note, we were triggering the accented value, which was causing a little bit of attack and a little bit of decay. Right now, when I've released the notes, we're playing this portion of the accented envelope. So let's go ahead and press a note again. So by varying my velocity value, I can get two different times here. Just when I press a note, and in addition I can use this velocity value to say how much the filter is going to be affected by this envelope. So right now, no notes are being played. Now I'll play a note. And I'll back off this velocity value. So right now we're playing this envelope time, and it's just a small amount because we've got this velocity value turned up. If I turn it up all the way, this envelope has no effect on the cutoff frequency because the velocity value is too low. As soon as I press a note, we're jumping to this time. Now let's say I wanted the same time no matter when how hard I pressed a note. Now a note's not played, and now I'll play a note. And again, if I back this off, you're going to hear more of the original envelope. Now I'll play a note. Let's increase our decay times a little bit. And again, we can adjust our velocity value to change the levels depending on whether a key is held or not held. Another thing I'd like to point out is when using the LFO output connected to the gate input to create repetitive triggering of the envelope section. Let's go ahead and listen to that. Right now we've just got the square waveform. Doesn't matter if we select the sawtooth or the triangle, they still will trigger the gate input. But if we go ahead and select the sample and hold waveform, we're now going to get a random triggering pattern of this envelope in time with the LFO rate of these other waveforms.